It turns out the Mayan rite of mass, has ruffled a few feathers, so to speak. This is evident by numerous voices now speaking up and saying what you're doing to the liturgy and what you're doing to the church more broadly is not Catholic, that this is something else. I have two relatively short letters, one of them very short, from a priest who is anonymous in his writing. He has to be, but he's been an anonymous critic in Europe of Francis, and I've featured him periodically, about once a year or so, on the channel. He's gets published by Marco Tosatti over on his website. Marco Tosatti is an Italian journalist with deep connections into the Roman Curia. He gets news items on occasion that turn out always to be true. Very trustworthy news source. And then the other is from Archbishop Hector Agur, who was Francis's old arch nemesis in Argentina. Back when Francis was just Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio of Buenos Aires, whenever there would be some debate about something to do either in Argentina or in the broader South American Bishops' Conference, Bergoglio would say something bizarre and offer some heretical sounding suggestion for something to do, and Hector Agur would always be on the opposition side. And Hector Agur was an archbishop who hit retirement age after Francis retired, or after Francis became Francis. And when Hector Agur hit retirement age, like all bishops, he submitted his letter of resignation to Pope Francis. And usually, when a letter of resignation is accepted by the reigning pontiff or a bishop, there's usually at least a couple of days that pass before it's accepted. Francis was waiting on pins and needles for it, had it marked on his calendar, because within a couple of hours of receiving the letter of resignation, his resignation had been accepted. To give you an idea of the animosity between them. And Hector Agur has been writing these kind of public corrections of Francis for years since then. He knows him better than anybody else. And when he speaks up, it's worth pointing out. And between the two of these letters, what you get is essentially an accusation. And that the accusation is that Francis is trying to destroy Catholicism and replace it with a new religion. We're going to go over both of these today before we get to a news item about something happening the next couple of days in Rome. So let's turn first to the first letter published on Marco Tossati's website. I am not a fan of this automatic translation, but the headline is Bergoglio is Pope, but of another church, where one is not saved, but condemned, all, by Monsignor ICS. And that is, or Monsignor X, as he is sometimes credited on that website. I'm not a fan of the translation. So what I did is I went to X and I used their AI called Grok and just gave it the command, can you translate the following text into English? And then I just copied and pasted it. And here is the translation as provided by Grok. A much better translation than what Google Chrome's extension gave. And Grok is free. If you're on X, you have free access to it. Here is what the anonymous theologian priest had to say in very short. Dear Tossati, yesterday I wondered why a soul seeking holiness should feel superior to another, thus risking Pharisaism. This is a response to a critique Francis gave recently that people who are seeking holiness somehow feel superior to other people and are Pharisees. Weird stuff. If that were the case, we wouldn't be talking about a soul seeking holiness, but rather a soul deluded into thinking it is holy. Where do we ever encounter such souls? Perhaps in novels written by those who hate religion and try to ridicule those who have faith. But what kind of novels would someone who believes that in Catholicism there are souls who, because they do good, feel superior, read? Always him. And then he cites where this comes from. Avenir, November 28th, Academic Community, the Pontifical John Paul II Institute. Pope said divorced, remarried, cohabiting, the church opens wide its doors to all, etc. This is from what I was citing in yesterday's live stream. Inviting regular couples not to feel superior, they're a risk of Pharisaism. Here's Francis is accusing married couples who are living their sacramental union and it's going well for them. And had the tendency, those of us who are married tend to feel kind of betrayed by the powers in Rome when all of a sudden the sacraments are open to those who are violating church teaching and doing so openly, right? Here we are being accused of being Pharisees. Dear Tosati, I expect that next time you'll invite regular and Catholic couples with a dangerous tendency towards Phariseeism to separate, divorce, and cohabit, so as not to humiliate others so beloved by the Pope. Meaning, dear Tosati, maybe we should all just break up and, to that way not to make people feel uncomfortable. He's being sarcastic. I take this opportunity to reflect on the tedious and eternal debate about the legitimacy or not of this pontiff. I state that he, Francis, is indeed a pontiff. Certainly, I am very sure of that. But he is the pontiff of a different church. Perhaps this is the key point. He is the pontiff of a church where one does not achieve salvation, but rather condemnation by papal teaching. All. It, Francis's church, is not the church of the Our Fathers, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, deliver us from evil. No. Therein is an enormous accusation. That what Francis is teaching is not Catholicism. Francis's synodal church is some kind of church, but it isn't the Catholic Church. And that church, because it is not the Catholic Church, offers no salvation, especially if you follow the teachings of Francis. Do you see why that priest had to be anonymous? He dresses it up with some humor, but at the end, he hits you with the anvil of the point, which is following Francis's teachings leads you down a very dark path of the wide and easy road. And the wide and easy road is the road to perdition. Does Church Catholic, does hell build bridges? Yes. It will give you as many access points to get there as you want. Thanks, Flying Tigers. Appreciated. Now I'm going to go to Hector Agur, the Archbishop Emeritus of La Plata, to give you an idea, by the way, of the animosity between Francis and Archbishop Hector Agur. The Archbishop who replaced Hector Agur was now Cardinal Fernandez. Okay, put in the writer of awful impure poetry, who then became the prefect for the now dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. That is who Francis put in there. Okay, to give you an idea of the animosity between the two. This is published by Rite Caeli by Hector Agur, the Mayan rite and papal progressivism, issued the day before Thanksgiving in Buenos Aires. Here's what he has to say about the Mayan rite. He says, the liturgy represents the intimate life of the church, its essence, the worship of the triune God, in which the first commandment is fulfilled, the reproduction of the paschal mystery of Jesus Christ, the communication of the grace of the Holy Spirit, and the celebration of the sacraments. The liturgy is carried out according to various Eastern and Western rites. The Roman rite includes the Ordo of the Latin Mass, which originated around the 6th century and has never been abrogated. In 1970, Pope Paul VI sanctioned a new Ordo Missae, the Novus Ordo, which is exercised with alterations here and there, and which lacks solemnity and beauty. For this reason, many young people adhere to the tradition of the, quote, traditional Mass, where it is not arbitrarily forbidden. The letter of that traditional Mass has the accuracy of ecclesiastical Latin. The Eastern rites remain unchanged over time. At most, they adopt, at least partially, the language of the place where they are celebrated. The current Ordo Missae, on the other hand, is characterized by its variability and includes numerous abuses. A field of special experimentation is music, a field in which Gregorian chant has been abandoned, and the use of popular instruments has been introduced, meaning secularized music. It is remarkable that even where there is a pipe organ, it remains silent. The displeasure provoked by these changes explains why many young people adhere to the, quote, Mass of all time. I noticed something curious. It could be thought that the current pontificate adopts in its liturgical orientation the popular Argentinian vices. Now another false step has been taken, the approval of the Mayan rite granted to Mexico. It is an incorporation to the rite of the Mass of pagan elements, abundant incensations, participation of women who intervene as if they were priestesses, popular music foreign to the religious environment, applause, and dances. What has been left of the Christian Eucharist? The formulation of this act constitutes the point of arrival of the transformation of the Catholic liturgy, now torn to pieces in the abolition of the divine worship, to which God is the Mayan rite addressed. The situation created by this fabrication is very serious. It alters the spontaneous relationship between the liturgy and heaven. A reference to the council cannot be made. The first document of Vatican II was the Constitution Sacrosanctum Concilium, voted almost unanimously. In this text, it was established, quote, that no one, even a priest, should dare to remove, add, or change anything in the liturgy on his own initiative. Let's pause there. Do you need to hear that again? For those of you who go to the ordinary form, the Novus Ordo Mass, the Mass that's in 99% of parishes in the West or better, how is that being followed? That's the opening sentence to Sacrosanctum Concilium, according to Archbishop Hector Agur, that no one, even a priest, should dare to add, remove, or change anything in the liturgy on his own initiative. Have you ever noticed that you go to any ordinary form parish in any diocese practically, and the masses are always a little bit different, that there's always ad-libbing, sometimes in the prayers, sometimes horrifyingly enough, in the consecration, the priest will make sure to keep the elements that make it valid, but then he will add a whole bunch of other nonsense. Sometimes he'll do performative things. Even in a lot of the more reverent kind of presented masses, there's always ad-libbing. All of that is not allowed by the document, the Constitution on the Liturgy from Vatican II. The same document that we are told gave us the new Mass, but when you read it, it doesn't ask for a new Mass. At most, it looks like it asks for the Pater Noster, that's the Our Father in the traditional Mass, and a few other prayers to be said with the laity in the local vernacular and with the readings from the Mass, the Gospel, and the Epistle, and the rest to be done in the vernacular, but the rest of the Mass is largely unchanged. But that's not what we got. The spirit of Vatican II prevailed. It was used as an excuse to give a new liturgy. But this document says that no one, even a priest, should dare to add, remove, or change anything in the liturgy on his own initiative. That qualifier, on his own initiative, is probably how you got your new Mass. But this shows you that every time you go to a Mass and it doesn't follow the general instruction of the Roman Missal, that every one of those priests is in violation of the Church's Constitution on the liturgy every single time. Made all the more absurd when you put this in light of the fact that they're just making this sort of thing that the ancient Aztecs would be fairly comfortable with and calling it a Catholic Mass. On its face, absurd. Let's continue because it's almost over. He says, it applies to the case I've been analyzing. The Supreme Pontiff, on his own initiative and against tradition and liturgical sense, promulgates a rite made up for a particular nation against the breadth of the liturgy in the whole church. The Mayan rite then contradicts the council because the council called for a Mass for the entire Latin West. The pontifical responsibility in this case suggests an aggravation of its progressivism. Motus in fine velocior. The movement is accelerating towards the end. And another evidence of this is the recent change in the ritual of the papal funeral, with the clear objective of desacralization. Synodality, it seems, that where there is pomp, as it is called in a demeaning way, there is no room for pobrissimo, which rite translates as the mimicry of false poverty. We must pray a lot for the Pope. May the holy seers of Fatima, Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia, intercede for the Church. Now, there's a reason he's asking for these seers of Fatima here as his closing invocation, and that is because there are numerous prelates who claim to have read the Third Secret of Fatima or been in the room when it was read aloud by a pope. This would include Malachi Martin and others who basically hinted at or said blatantly, as Cardinal Ciappi said in the 90s, that the Third Secret of Fatima details an apostasy in the church led from the top. So many different sources of people credibly able to have been in the room when it was read by John the 23rd, Paul VI, or John Paul II. So many of them said that from across the church's own internal divide, that the idea that what we were given in 2000 by Bertone was real is laughable. Apostasy in the church led from the top. And that tells you why he's invoking Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia. They intercede for the church because the entire thing here is that the Mayan rite of Mass represents an apostasy, or part of the ongoing apostasy. Now, he makes a reference here to the change of the ritual of the papal funeral. I was going to cover that, but all the news happened, right? So the quick version is Francis issued some new norms for the papal funeral. You saw the hint of this with the way they treated Benedict XVI. They treated him just disgracefully. This is part of the inversion of the hierarchy and the stripping down of the authority of the Pope to trying to essentially force him to become first among equals. When a Pope passes away, moving forward, his funeral is going to not look like a state funeral. It's not going to have all the finery and everything that you would expect of the Prince of the Apostles, the successor of Peter, of the Vicar of Christ, going to his judgment. Instead, they're going to strip it down and make it not much different than that of any other bishop. It's really disgraceful what they've done, and my hope is that the next pontiff actually undoes that one almost first, because it's an attack on the papacy itself. And as he says here, the entire, it's done with the excuse of the church of the poor. We must have the church of the poor, and we must be more humble, yada, yada, yada. And this is the mimicry of false poverty. This is this facade that the modernists have. Remember, the modernists who weirdly, Archbishop Vigano, before he became papal nuncio, was investigating financial problems in the Vatican and found millions upon millions of euros worth of money hidden away in various places. Cardinal Pell took on that work afterwards, millions upon millions of euros hidden in various places. Cardinal Becciu followed that work, and except he played the game with Rome. And so he participated in all the problems. And the same thing happened to all three of them, basically. Vigano got sent to America as papal nuncio for his own protection and then eventually got canceled when he spoke up. Cardinal Pell, well, we know what happened to Cardinal Pell, right? Mysterious transfers of money from Rome to Australia. And then suddenly the system turned against him radically there, leading to an extremely unlikely passing for Cardinal Pell. Pray for the repose of his soul. Please do not forget Cardinal Pell in your prayers. And then Cardinal Becciu becoming the fall guy for all of it. The modernists talk a good game about poverty when they themselves never, ever live up to their own words. And you see it in all the financial problems that the Vatican has, and not just their inability to get the money they need anymore because the laity have had enough, but with their sucking up to the state for their grant dollars, and with their all that, just how dirty their hands are with money. Now speaking of Rome, what's going on in Rome, you may be aware that on Saturday, December 7th, there was a consistory happening in Rome. If you don't know what a consistory is, it's a big get-together where Francis summons a bunch of bishops and some priests to Rome to elevate them to the office of cardinal. Sometimes this happens, as you'll see in this story, as an honorific. They've hit the age of mandatory retirement even for a cardinal, but he's getting a reward for a job well done. They are a cardinal. They have all the honors of it, but they can't participate in anything cardinals do, it would include working in the Roman Curia and, most importantly, in the conclave that will give us the next Roman pontiff. But it's an honorific. Or, for the most of these men, they become cardinal electors. They will participate in the conclave that gives us the next Roman pontiff if they do not age out before Francis goes to his judgment. Saturday, December 7th, a conclave is happening, or a consistory is happening, rather. Francis is making 21 new cardinals. Once the consistory is done, he will be responsible for 80% of the cardinals who will choose the next Roman pontiff. There are, by canon law, 120 who can participate. He always, just like his predecessors did, create more cardinals than needed to participate because they age out over the year. No one really knows what happens if a conclave has to be held to give us a new pope, and there are more cardinal electors than canon law allows. Presumably, they'll all be allowed to participate because otherwise it would create scandal. And but they age out at the age of 80, and that's one of those post-conciliar novelties. Paul VI, probably recognizing that what Vatican II had brought to the church was an absolute revolution in the church, imposed a law on the church that has never been abrogated. And it says that at age 80, cardinals can no longer participate in the papal conclave. That resulted in him getting to remake the Roman Curia almost entirely, between just all the cardinals who were already over age but still operating in their capacities, as well as over the course of the next several years before he went to his own judgment, being able to clean house in the Roman Curia. So every year, practically, except for one so far in Francis's papacy, Francis has gotten to make a bunch of new cardinals. And again, it's 80% of the cardinals who will choose the next pope. And so we have an idea of the caliber of men he's chosen. And so far, the reporting on it has shown that it isn't good. The highest profile was a Dominican priest who was a fellow traveler with James Martin, and everybody focused on that. But we now have a news story. So go to Vatican News. This is the BBC of the Vatican, basically, with the headline: 5 Italians to be elevated as cardinals by Pope Francis at December 7th consistory. There's only one cardinal that I could not find much on here, but even what he's known for in this article makes me suspicious of him. It looks very clearly like Francis is preparing for the next conclave to make sure he has the best chance of getting a Francis II, even after he is gone. And the reason for that is that for the revolution in the church to be successful, he needs to keep it going after he's gone. It's a succession plan. I'll give you my prediction for the next conclave, roughly when I think it's going to be and what the outcome is likely to be after we talk about this consistory. But these are 5 Italians. That's unusual. Francis usually likes to go to the peripheries. But when understanding something about Italian bishops, they know Rome better than anybody else. They're best prepared to operate the Roman Curia better than anybody else because they know Rome. They know the Vatican. They know the inner workings. They know the secrets. They know how it all works. Those cardinals from the peripheries come to Rome when they need to, but they rarely talk to other cardinals. The bishops in Rome, the cardinals from Rome, they know the game. Begin to see how this works. This is preparing for the next conclave, whenever that is. Let's go over this article. 5 Italians have been chosen by Pope Francis to become cardinals at this December 7th consistory, 4 of whom are under 80 years old and therefore have voting rights to elect a new pope at the next conclave. In total, 21 cardinals representing the Catholic Church's geographical diversity will be created at the upcoming consistory. Metropolitan Archbishop Roberto Rapole of Turin, who edited the series The Theology of Pope Francis, is a theologian and former president of the Italian Theological Association, educated at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. The 57-year-old prelate actively participated in both plenary sessions of the Worldwide Synod on Synodality that took place in the Vatican in 2023 and 2024. Rapole also participated in the 2024 Theological Pastoral Forums, created by the Synod of Bishops to deepen study and reflection on the missionary action of the Church. This is a Bergoglian. He wrote the book on Francis's weird theology. He is a Bergoglian through and through. He's 57. Keep an eye on him. He will be active as a cardinal for the next 23 years. He will take part in the next conclave to give us Francis a successor. Excuse me. Next, Archbishop Baldassare Reina, Vicar General of the Diocese of Rome. Vicar General means he's governing Rome for Francis. Remember, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope's title, one of them is the Bishop of Rome. So he is the Bishop of the Diocese of Rome, but he's a little busy to be doing the day-to-day thing. So this is your Vicar General, and is the youngest of the Italian prelates to be elevated to the cardinalate on December 7th. In 2024 alone, in addition to being chosen for the College of Cardinals, the 54-year-old, for the next 26 years, meaning 2050 is when he will age out. Prelate was appointed by Pope Francis as Vicar General of the Diocese of Rome, Archpriest of the Basilica of St. John Lateran, titular Bishop of Aqua de Mauritania, Apostolic Administrator of Ostia, and Grand Chancellor of the Pontifical Lateran University. The next is Father Fabio Baggio, CS. He's the only one of 5 Italian cardinal elects who belongs to a religious congregation. He will become titular Archbishop of Arussi. He's a priest of the Missionaries of St. Charles, or the Scalabrians. He has worked in the Vatican's dicastery for promoting integral human development since 2017. Another Bergoglian. This is the dicastery for implementing Laudato Si. With the appointment of Canadian Jesuit Cardinal Michel Czerny as the dicastery's prefect in 2022, Baggio was subsequently promoted to the dicastery's undersecretary. From 2017 to 2022, he was the head also of the dicastery's people moving around a lot section. Next is Metropolitan Archbishop Domenico Battaglia of Naples. This is the one I couldn't find anything enough on to make a judgment on this or not, but he has been known for his love for the poor. He led we'll call it a recovery center in Catanzaro, Calabria, for over 20 years during his priestly ministry. Appointed by Pope Francis as Archbishop of Naples in 2022, he, also known as Don Mimo, had previously served as Bishop of Coreto, Sanita, Tele, Santa Agata dei Goti in Italy's southwestern region of Campania from 2016 to 2020. Running a recovery center does not mean you're a Bergoglian. It's actually laudable work to do, obviously, just to be clear about that. But if you know anything about him, because I couldn't find anything on this bishop, but I mean, I would expect he's a Bergoglian. I would expect the Italian choices, especially because of their knowledge of Rome more than anyone else, are being done on purpose. And finally, here's your honorific. At 99 years old, Archbishop Angelo Acerbi will become the oldest member of the College of Cardinals at the upcoming consistory. He has served as a bishop of the Catholic Church for 50 years. He's 99, folks. He also has 40 years of experience working as part of the Holy See's diplomatic corps. Between 1974 and 2001, he served as nuncio to New Zealand, Colombia, Hungary, Moldova, and the Netherlands. From 2001 to 2005, he was prelate of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Again, he's 99. He was doing that until he was 89 years old. Due to being over the age of 80, he will not be able to participate in the next conclave. And here is your kicker. Remember, 120 cardinals can participate in a conclave, but there will be 253 members of the College of Cardinals. At least half of them will be too old to participate in the conclave, but there'll be over 120 should a consistory the conclave happen next year, which I do not think is going to happen. Instead, my prediction for the next conclave is that we're going to have Francis for at least 2 or 3 more years, possibly longer. And after his time is done, you're going to get one of 2 outcomes at that conclave. You're either going to get a Francis II. I tend to lean a little bit on Catholic prophecy for this. Some mystics have said there will be 2 consecutive anti-popes. So, right, you might get a Francis II. Or option B, and I think this is actually the worst option, you'll get a moderate. Somebody who will call himself Benedict the 17th, John Paul III, somebody like that. Because I consider John Paul II and Benedict the 16th to be moderates in the grand scheme of things. Their implementation of Vatican II kind of makes them not be able to be considered traditional or conservative in that real sense. But a moderate will be there to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to repair the internal divisions of the church, and that's it. That is all they will be there to do, to calm the tides in the church down. That's their main objective. And what such a figure will do is next to nothing. They might chastise some heterodox statements made by priests and things. You might see James Martin calm down a little bit during such a reign. But what you will not see is the Roman Curia cleared out, the Jesuits dealt with, Fernandez expelled. You won't see any of that stuff. It will be somebody who will be chosen to not stir the pot. No more calling everybody Pharisees and the rest of it. Maybe they'll loosen the Latin Mass up a little bit to calm the trads down, but that's about it. Those are the 2 options I think is going to happen. Remember, Francis has chosen 80% of the people who will choose his successor. Those are your most likely options. Edgy reminds us so-called conservatives and moderates do some major damage. Well, yes, they do, because, again, they are keeping the post-conciliar changes going instead of trying to solve the problem. My dream hope of anybody available for it would be Schneider because he's, I think, the best of the options. And he's the and my dream pick because he's not going to become he's not even a cardinal, so there's no chance. And he's criticized Francis too much to have a chance. But he at least admits there's problems with the documents of Vatican II that need to be seriously looked at and addressed. That immediately makes him the best option available. Um, Chester Marie says, better name for American Magazine would be The Modernist. Yeah. Yeah. All right, folks. Is any final thoughts on all of this in the comments, please? I do suggest that you pray for all those priests and the bishops who are being made cardinals this weekend. That would be a good idea. They do need your prayers, especially if they're actually like, modernists who are probably going to undermine the church. Pray for them. Remember to pray for your own priests as well. If there's any final thoughts, get them in now. Otherwise, we will wrap this up. Let's take a look here. Want to wear the scapulars will interfere with my clothing at the gym. Wear your scapular at the gym. I do it all the time. It's fine. St. Michael chaplet is powerful. Yeah, there's also I posted a chaplet at a novena that goes through Christmas on Return to Tradition's Facebook page. Go take a look at that if you haven't and join us in praying. It would be a very good idea. What if they double down and go with an even more heretical pope? That's more likely. Well, that was the first option, Francis II, who I'd imagine would be worse and probably younger. That's why I would suggest keeping an eye on Pietro Parolin, Cardinal Tagle, figures like that. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in today. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.